Welcome and Fulcha. This is Random Thoughts from County Antrim, and I'm your host, David McDonnell. This is March the 28th. It's the last podcast we're going to do in the month of March of 2021. Now, this month has been semi-reserved, at least the last 3 episodes, been reserved to celebrate St. Patrick. So I'll continue that theme tonight. And then we'll move on to something else in April. And I started this podcast in late May of last year, mainly because I couldn't do anything live, and I'd had nothing else to do during this pandemic. And my intent was to continue the podcast throughout the pandemic, and here we are. I just counted. It was our 44th podcast. And who knew, I mean, I certainly didn't, that the virus would still be winning 44 podcasts later. And the pandemic is still winning. I mean, we're still at about 1,000 deaths per day. And we're likely to have a major surge soon. Because governments have relaxed requirements and individuals have relaxed their diligence. And I say that despite the fact that we've had wonderful progress, kind of brilliant progress, really, in distributing the vaccines, at least here in the U.S. We've got a ways to go worldwide. I had my second vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine. I had the second one 2 weeks ago. And that seems to be the magic date. This vaccine plus 14 days. And the 14 days expired yesterday. And I'm not quite sure, I have to confess ignorance in this regard. I'm not quite sure what's so magic about it. I mean, I feel safer, but I don't think I can yet go into a pub and mingle with the crowd or go to a movie theater. And I'm certainly not going to go to Florida for a spring break. But I think we're making progress, which is something we haven't been doing for quite some time. And as I tried to make clear in a video I showed 2 weeks ago about, I had some sports clips, and I still think 2 weeks later, we're still celebrating too early. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, what I did is I did the Random Thoughts Story Swap Roman numeral 1. And I told, one of the things I did is I showed a clip of me telling a tale of St. Patrick. I actually told that tale on St. Patrick's Day at a local television station. And then last week, I told some tales about St. Patrick and kind of turned it into a trivia contest. And I'm going to continue that trivia contest today. And I'm going to award a prize to the winner. I think I'll do that next week. So add your points from last night to your points tonight. Just as a refresher, in case you forgot how many points you got last week, but go out if you're sitting near somewhere where you can get a paper and pencil, or pull out your pad and your notepad and tally your points that way. But I asked you what historians know about St. Patrick, and if you answered nothing, give yourself a point. And I told you about 2 letters from St. Patrick. One of them was autobiographical. And if you knew that it was called St. Patrick's Confessio, or St. Patrick's Confession, give yourself another point. And give yourself yet another point if you knew that this letter, the Confessio, was now in Trinity College in Dublin. It was written sometime in the 5th century. And if you've ever gone to Trinity College Library and checked that book out, St. Patrick's Confessio, give yourself 1,000 points because you earned it. And I told you there was yet a second letter written by St. Patrick, and if you knew that the letter is right here in my possession and available for sale, give yourself yet another point. And if you knew St. Patrick was a Briton, this Celtic cultural group, ethnic group that settled on the island way before the Romans and the Angles and the Saxons. If you knew that Patrick was a Briton, give yourself a point. And if you knew that Patrick was captured by Irish raiders and then taken to Ireland, you earned a point. And if you knew these raiders weren't really pirates, as it's sometimes cast in literature today, certainly on websites, that it was captured by Irish pirates. If you knew these weren't pirates, but rather Irish clans doing what Irish clans did, which was raid their neighbors, then you earned a point. And if you knew that from the annals of Ireland, how they referred to the booty that an Irish clan did when it raided a neighboring clan, how did they refer to those? If you knew the answer was movables, yet another point. And yet another point if you knew that one of the things that was movable was people. And sometimes Irish clans, when they raided a neighboring clan, would take people, which is what they did with St. Patrick. And another point, if you suspect, even if you don't have any evidence, if you suspect that the Irish clan that captured St. Patrick in Britain and brought him to Ireland was Clan Donald, then that is another point. Now, it wasn't known by that name at the time, but the predecessors to Clan Donald settled along the Irish coast, the northeast coast, and were seafaring people, and they made raids into Britain quite frequently. And they took movables, and one of them may have been St. Patrick. Now, once he was there in Northern Ireland, St. Patrick had a vision telling him to leave Northern Ireland. And if you knew that, you get a point. And if you believe, as I do, that he had that vision by eating mushrooms, which are native to that part of County Antrim, give yourself another point. And you'll lose a point, or at least get 0 points, if you believe, as St. Patrick did, that his vision was from an angel. Then I asked, where did Patrick go after he had this vision? 1 point if he answered France. And he later returned to Britain. He may have had some more mushrooms because I had another vision. 1 point if you know that that vision said to him, come and walk with us. And another point if you knew that vision spoke to him in the Irish language. So that's what he did. He went to Ireland. I asked you how many St. Patricks there were. If you answered probably 2, give yourself a point. And give yourself a bonus point if you knew one of them was Palladius, who was probably an Italian who was sent there by the Pope a generation or so before Patrick the Briton. And I asked what was Patrick's name, at least the name given to him by his mom and dad. 1 point if you answered Maewyn Succat. And another point if you knew the name Patricius was Latin. And in the era it meant honorable or noble man. And Patricius was a name affixed to Palladius when he was in Ireland, probably, and affixed to Patrick or Maewyn when he was in Ireland. So they both became known as Patricius. That's why the legends of Patrick may be a little blurred as to which Patricius were they referring to. I asked which pope named Patrick a saint, and if you answered none of them, give yourself a point. Because he was named a saint by the Irish people long before the Pope sort of took a monopoly on this whole sainthood business. And why do we celebrate on March 17? 1 point if you answered that presumably that's the day St. Patrick died. If you call it his birthday, negative point. And give yourself another point if you know that we have no idea, no frickin' clue when St. Patrick actually died. And we celebrate, or we have that date fixed as a day of celebration, not a day of celebration, but a day of contemplation and reflection, because that's what the church wanted us to do on March 17th. All right, got your points tallied, because that's the recap from last week. Now I got some new questions for you. When was St. Patrick's Day first celebrated? Something other than a religious day of contemplation and reflection, but rather a celebration, a day of revelry. When and where did that take place? I'll give you a moment to think of an answer. Well, the answer is Boston, and sometime in the 1730s. And who celebrated it then? Well, it was Irish, obviously. It was Irish immigrants, Irish Protestants who were in Boston. Because the first Irish Americans were Protestants. They were often referred to as the Ulster Scots or the Scots Irish. I talked a few weeks ago about Andrew Jackson, who was one of those, and he and his family. But the Ulster Scots, the Scots Irish, came to the colonies in the 17th and 18th century. Several of them signed the Declaration of Independence, and many of them fought in the Continental Army in the War of Independence. And the Catholics that arrived, we'll get to them shortly, but the Catholics that arrived in the United States didn't do so really in large numbers until the 19th century. But there were Protestants in Boston in the 1730s, and they missed dear old Ireland, and they decided to celebrate and party on St. Patrick's Day. And they certainly were less concerned with the Catholic days of contemplation and reflection, so that St. Patrick's Day was a perfect opportunity to have a party. Literature the records almost always suggested that was the correct answer, Boston. So give yourself a point if you pick Boston. Give yourself another point if you pick 1730s. But it is possible that the first St. Patrick's Day celebration was over a century earlier, and it was in St. Augustine, Florida. Because there's some evidence that there were and recently discovered or recently written about evidence. The cannons were fired and fireworks were set off, and a party was had in St. Augustine in 1601. And it's unclear exactly why. It may be a reflection of the Celtic Galician people who may have settled or been stationed at the garrison in St. Augustine. There's also some reference that the priest in St. Augustine at the time was an Irishman. And so he kind of led or started, or in honor of him, there was a celebration in St. Augustine in 1601. And that may have been the first celebration as a revelry of St. Patrick's Day. All right, related to that, something we all do pre-pandemic and we'll do post-pandemic is participate in or go to a St. Patrick's Day parade. I was Grand Marshal at the Traverse City St. Patrick's Day parade a few years ago. It was a real hoot to be marching in the parade. I marched in my dog and I marched in the Little Rock St. Patrick's Day parade a few years back too, and that was fun as well. And I've been to all kinds of St. Patrick's Day parades. It's a tradition, either on St. Patrick's Day or the Saturday or Sunday before. So it's a long tradition. So when was the first? When was the first St. Patrick's Day parade? Where and when? Well, the where was New York City. Yet another North American start of that tradition. And the year was 1762, the first New York St. Patrick's Day parade, and probably the first St. Patrick's Day parade ever. Now, this next one's a trivia question that almost everybody gets wrong, because it's just a bit of history that they just don't necessarily grasp, or it's not really on the top of their mind. New York City, 1762, first St. Patrick's Day parade. Who marched in it? Who marched in that parade? Well, the answer is it was soldiers in the British Army. It may surprise you a little bit unless you understand the makeup of the British Army at that time. For many, many centuries, there was very little opportunities for young men in Ireland. So many of them joined the British Army or the British Navy. Ireland was Britain's first colony, and one can make a good argument that the British Empire was created in large part from the service of the Irish in the British Army and the British Navy. Now, at the time in the 18th century, Irish Protestants could become officers in the British Army and the British Navy. Irish Catholics could not. There were some times where Irish Catholics could become officers in the British Navy, but generally Irish Catholics could not become officers, but they could join the Army or the Navy. And at the time, again, as I mentioned, there were very few Irish Catholic settlers in the colonies in North America at the time. Came later. Came during the 19th century. But there were a great number of Irish Catholics in the British Army, and there was considerable unrest in America in the 1760s. It was led up to the 1770s when war broke out between the colonies and the British. And the British responded to that by generally starting to ship more and more troops to North America, and most of those were garrisoned in the cities along the East Coast, including New York City. So there were a lot of British soldiers in New York City, a lot of Irish in the British Army, and those Irish soldiers decided to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with a parade. And that's the first parade of St. Patrick's Day. Irish soldiers in the British Army in New York City. Excuse me, I got a wet dog just kind of walked against me. It's raining out here, which should be very common in March in Michigan. We get a lot of rain in March and April. Now, give yourself a point if you answered New York. Give yourself another point if you picked the 1760s. Give yourself yet another point if you said it was soldiers in the British Army who marched in that first parade. Now, despite possible 3 points, let me suggest to you that maybe that's not the right answer, but you can have the points anyway. It's possible that the very first St. Patrick's Day parade was in St. Augustine, Florida in 1601. Because there's some reference, at least, it may depend on how you define parade, but there's some references that after the fireworks and the cannons and everything else as part of the celebration of St. Patrick's Day in St. Augustine in 1601, people marched down the street in a short parade. So it's possible the answer is St. Augustine in 1601 was the first parade. So give yourself another point if you said St. Augustine in 1601, plus or minus 10 years. We'll be gracious in that regard. All right, how we doing here? Let's do Shamrocks. Now, legend has it that St. Patrick used the three-leaf shamrock to illustrate the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, did he? What do you think? Well, the correct answer is, who knows? He probably did, but no one really knows. So I'll give you a point no matter how you answer that question. Patrick and the early priest in Ireland were pretty good at taking the ancient Celtic customs and religious beliefs and kind of turning them into Christian themes. And the Druids had long held the number 3 as sacred, because many things, as you know, come in threes. Earth, wind, and fire, and past, present, and future. Faith, hope, and charity. And the shamrock to the Druids and to the ancient Irish, the Celtic Irish, was considered a sacred plant. So it's quite possible that Patrick kind of appropriated the shamrock that was already well known as a religious symbol to the Celtic Irish, appropriated it and made it a Christian symbol for the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Point no matter how you answer it, because we don't know the answer to that. What's next? How about snakes? Let's talk about snakes. You know the legend. St. Patrick rid Ireland of snakes. So the question is, did he? Give yourself a point if you answered no. Part 2 of that, worth another point. If St. Patrick didn't do it, what rid Ireland of the snakes? The answer is it was the Ice Age. During the Ice Age, virtually the entire island of Ireland was covered in ice. And where I'm sitting right now in northern Michigan was likewise covered in ice. It was about a mile or two high above where we are now. Was a glacier right above where I'm sitting at the moment. And the same was true of Ireland. And it made it far too cold for snakes, even if there were some there before the Ice Age. Now, snakes can swim, but they can't swim very far. So even if they had been there and the cold scared them away, it was too far for them to go anywhere else off the island. Don't forget, maybe I'll give you another point. Is Ireland an island? Yes, give yourself a point. So there's no place for the snakes to go if they were even there, and the Ice Age would have killed them had they stayed. But Ireland's not alone in that regard. I think the same thing is true with Greenland and Iceland, and I think even New Zealand. But the Ice Age just made it very difficult for certain reptiles to survive, and that's true in Ireland. Now, the legend is that he rid Ireland of the snakes during his fast, his 40 days fast, and he responded by just banishing all of the snakes from Ireland. So did he? I mean, why would that legend arrive? What's the source of the legend of him getting rid of the snakes in Ireland? Got your answer? Got it written down? Well, again, I think it's part of it was religious symbolism. The Druids used serpents in their religious symbolism. So the legend may have evolved to symbolize Patrick's ridding Ireland of the Druids and pagan religions and substituting it with Christianity. Also, the serpent is generally recognized as a symbol of evil. It was the serpent, remember, who tricked Eve into eating the forbidden fruit and resulted in banishment of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. And the serpent represents temptation. So maybe that's why the legend kind of evolved about St. Patrick and the snakes, because what St. Patrick banished from Ireland was temptation. Although you have to admit, he really wasn't successful. There's still a fair amount of temptation in Ireland, even today. When you think about it, though, there aren't a lot of Druids, though, so maybe he was successful in that regard. All right, one final trivia question. St. Patrick may not have rid Ireland of snakes, but he did do a number on another critter. Even went to war with another critter. What is that critter? Give you a hint. Give yourself 2 points if you knew the answer without the hint. The hint is this critter flies. give yourself a point if you can know the answer to that with the clue. And if you answered birds, then you're a smart ass and take away a point. That answer is not specific enough. What critter that Patrick did a number on, had a battle with, is the crows. And he and other Catholic priests did their best to demonize all Celtic gods. And one of these gods lived on a mountain, which is now known as Croagh Patrick. It's in what is now County Mayo. And it was a religious site for thousands of years, way before Patrick arrived at Ireland. And Patrick climbed this mountain to do 40 days of fasting. Prayer, reflection, and fasting. And I don't know if he partaked in mushrooms when he was there, but the demons sent thousands and thousands of crows to attack him on that mountain. Straight out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie, and I don't know what Alfred Hitchcock's motivation was for his movie, The Birds, but thousands of birds attacked Patrick on this mountain, coming in from all directions. Now, Patrick climbed this mountain. He didn't carry any food because he went up to the mountain to fast, but he did carry at least three objects. He carried a crozier, and I don't know if you're familiar with crozier. It's a long walking stick with a curve on the end, and you still see bishops and the Pope and others carrying a crozier in ceremonies. He also brought with him holy water. Figured he needed that. And he brought a bell. I mean, why he brought a bell, I don't know, but he took that with him. Now, when he was attacked by the crows, the first thing Patrick did is wave his crozier back and forth among the birds. And that turned the birds into smoke, a dark black smoke. And so Patrick thought he had the game won. But the birds quickly materialized again and returned. And when they returned, Patrick took his holy water and threw it up in the air. And that scared away the birds. The birds all flew away from the holy water. But they returned. And they returned, Patrick began to sing psalms from the Bible. And that pushed away the birds, and the birds flew away yet again. But yet again, they returned. Patrick then rang his bell, and as I said, why he brought a bell up to the top of this mountain, I will never know, but he did. And he rang this sacred bell at the top of the mountain. And the holy bell was just too much for the birds. The sound of the ringing bell just caused them to scatter, and it caused them to turn into more angelic birds. And they stopped their attack on Patrick. They stopped their cackling, that crow sound that we're all too much used to, and began to sing more angelic songs, the wonderful bird songs that many of us are used to as well. So that's the story of Patrick's encounter with the crows. Now, people still make pilgrimages to Croagh Patrick in Mayo. And some people just make that hike for the fun. And it takes about 2 hours to reach the top. A little bit less to get back down. And there are people expecting them to go up. So there are people, particularly on holidays, who will go halfway up, a third of the way up, and carry water with them. And then when people come up on their pilgrimage, they'll give them a drink of water so they can make it all the way to the top. And giving people water as they go up to the top of the mountain is perfectly legal in Ireland. Of course, it's illegal in Georgia to give people water if they're standing in line to vote. But if you're climbing up a mountain on a pilgrimage in Ireland, it is legal and permissible. Now, the mountain is known as, maybe I make this a trivia question. What is the mountain known as by the locals? Patrick, County Mayo. What do they call it in County Mayo? Give yourself a point if you know the answer is the Reek. R-E-E-K, Reek. Give yourself 1,000 points if you know why, because I can't figure out why. It's called the Reek. It just is. And many people climb the Reek. Many people do it barefoot. I don't know if they thought that St. Patrick did it barefoot, so they want to do it barefoot. And the largest number of people who do this do on a special day, and it's on a Sunday. So we'll make that a trivia question. 1 point if you know the answer. What's it called? Well, the answer is Reek Sunday. And so many people climb the mountain on their pilgrimage, climbing up the Reek. Now, I've been to the mountain. I haven't climbed it. My main reason of going there is I wanted to see. There's a wonderful coffin ship memorial at the bottom of the mountain, and I went there to see that. And I didn't climb the mountain, and it wasn't Reek Sunday, so I didn't feel compelled to climb the mountain. Come to think of it, I didn't see a lot of crows when I was at the bottom of the mountain, so maybe there's some truth to the legend. All right, that's the end of the trivia. Please tally up your score from last week and today. Send me an email at clandonald@gmail.com with your total number of points. I will announce the winner next week, and I do have a brilliant and extremely valuable prize that I will give to the winner. In the meantime, take a look at my website, clandonald.net. Like and share me on Facebook. And while you're on the edge of your chairs trying to see if you won, you're going to have to wait till next week. Goodbye.